Wellness Buffs Newbies. Where's the money for retailers? All right. On our next panel, come on out, panelists. Lauren Fontaine, founder, chief compliance officer at The Artist Tree. Caleb Counts, CEO and co-founder at Connected Cannabis. Welcome back, Dustin Moore, co-founder of Embark. Nicole West, director of sales and marketing at California Brand House. And Annie Fleischman, VP of marketing at Flow Hub. Have fun.
Thank you so much. This is going to be a super cool panel. I'm really excited to share where the money's at for our California cannabis retailer market. So we're going to just pop into it and ask the question, what is driving profits for cannabis retailers today? So Lauren, I'm going to start with you furthest on the stage and make your way back here.
Sure. So hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm Lauren Fontaine. I'm with The Artist Tree. We have 9 stores throughout California. So we're in a lot of different markets. And you know what we see across our stores is there's actually a lot of differences between different markets. And so one thing I would advise retailers to look at is look at each location individually, because we really do tailor our offerings to the customers at each store. So the average cart size is significantly lower in some markets versus others. We have a higher percentage of older customers in certain markets. And so that's something, you know, overall, don't assume the California cannabis consumer is the same everywhere, but look at each market individually. And as far as our brand, I'll say that we really shaped our brand and our concept based on consumer segments. So we thought about who's underserved, which customers are really looking for places to shop and they're not getting that now. And when we started our first store after 2018, so once adult use got legalized, we wanted to make places that were really appealing to new cannabis consumers, to female customers, and to older consumers specifically. So we weren't trying to target those legacy consumers because we knew that there was a lot of competition in that market, and especially starting in LA. They probably had places they were shopping. We couldn't really focus on them specifically, and so we built the stores out to have this art concept that would be appealing to consumers that maybe didn't feel comfortable with cannabis, and to really reflect the local community, and created spaces that looked nice inside, were warm and welcoming, and where the focus was really on customer service. And we saw, you know, that worked very well for us in getting a lot of new consumers in the door that maybe hadn't even tried cannabis before, and really catering to those women and to those older customers. And so to answer your question about, you know, what's driving revenue, so there is still that core stereotypical customer demographic of the male, 20 to 35. But for us, we see a lot of value in those older customers. So just for example, looking at average cart size, for us, for customers 50 and over, it's almost $20 or even more per customer coming in the door than for a younger consumer. So that's huge. So for us, we know those older customers are willing to spend more, they're gonna be loyal, they're really looking to feel comfortable and educated in their experience. And that's a growing segment, right? People are getting older, and we're seeing a lot of interest in that market. So I would say that's, you know, one trend that really spoke to me when I was looking at the data, and I think that's an area of focus.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Caleb, go ahead. What's driving profits for you?
Thank you. I'll follow up with the last word you used, and it's focus. We've been able to find success in our retail strategy by focusing on 3 core categories that actually do overlap. The Cannasseur, the person who's looking for the highest quality, the newest drops, the newest releases, the best quality products across whatever spectrum they're shopping for. And then the economic, the value consumer, right? The people that are looking for the best quality cannabis in the biggest quantities at the lowest price, right? And there's a lot of good stuff out there nowadays at really good prices. And then the heavy user, and the heavy user overlaps both categories. And so we found by targeting those consumer bases and just focusing on those, regardless of what demographic they fit into, we found a lot of success there. We've, in the past, past, when we've had stores in other locations through MSAs, we've tried to try to be everything to everyone, and that just doesn't work. So knowing your core consumer, knowing what's going to drive the revenue in that area, that neighborhood, and then focusing on 2 to 3, maybe 4 categories of consumers, I think is the key to success, regardless of where you're at.
Yeah, I picking up kind of where the last 2 speakers left off. I find that the market has not developed the way that many hoped it would. I think when you look at market segmentation, I think there's sometimes an overemphasis on different categories, whether it's Cannasseurs, the Lululemon mom, et cetera, the baby boomer. What I think we've seen is that market really hasn't been borne out as a frequent consumer. So I would say what drives profit in a dispensary is any consumer that's willing to come into a licensed store. Where you go from there, it's really bolstered by how you can educate that consumer and how you can ensure that that consumer is not just a deal-based consumer. Like, how can you drive a service model that creates value for that customer where they're willing to come back? As an example, at Embark, through our Passport Club. And by the way, our marketing and CRM team should be up here. I'm a horrible stand-in. They have far more data than I do. But in my analysis of what I'm seeing born out of our store is that focusing on the folks who keep our lights on, the legacy customer that's going to come in every day and purchase is so critical. But then how do we open and expand that consumer base? So Embark does it through live events. So this last year, the California State Fair, we saw about 800,000 people come through. We had the ability for folks to purchase and consume. We converted many of those consumers into Passport Club members and then retargeted them to come back into our store. And that's interestingly where we're starting to see some of the more Canna-curious consumers, if you will. One encouraging thing, while I don't mean to be a downer saying that the market's not evolving the way that it should, the recent NIDA study that came out suggests that women between 19 and 30 are outpacing their male counterparts. So that is amazing. I think it's just, we all had high hopes that, post-legalization, that all of a sudden that there was going to be this flood of new consumers into our doors, and that's not the case. So you have to be able to balance the fact that the traditional consumer is who keeps your lights on, and from there, how do you figure out how to further expand that market? That's what we're finding, across our fleet.
So the thing that I feel like I'm hearing the most from everyone is they're authentically about what they are good at. And that's something that I think is really important for everybody to consider. Authenticity really goes a long way, and I think we see that time and time again in all branding and all marketing. One thing that I will say, I've been on both sides of retail as well as brand development. Education is really going to make or break your retail establishment. So if you're not taking it seriously to have staff members that are on your front line engaging with the consumers with high levels of education, pardon the pun, you're literally going to have no hope for developing your customer. I'm seeing this happen time and time again with some of the larger chains. I won't name any, but we can all put our heads around people who I'm talking about, who are unfortunately training their customer to be cheap. And that is a lack of education amongst your staff, because if everything in your store is about the cheapest product and about dollars, that is a part of the retail establishment's inability to properly educate the consumer. Now, I'll go even a step further back. Brands, that's your fault, because you're not coming in and properly educating these staff members about your product in a way that not only helps that segment sell your product, but helps them sell all products. When I come into a store, I tell people, if you let me train your staff about my product, whether it be rosin or pre-rolls or whatever it is, I promise you that your staff will be better at selling these products. And that is a really important part when we talk about where's the money. The money is in being educated enough to understand a quality upsell, not a basic upsell, not that this is the cheap product, not that this is what we're bribing somebody with today. A quality upsell that is for the consumer that you're engaging with. Is this a senior customer? Is this old school hippie vet that loves their specific outdoor weed? Are we going and getting them the product of that proper upsell? And that's something that I think we're missing a lot in some of the larger chains, as well as even the mom and pop shops that think that I'm going to open a door and we're just going to sell weed. Education. And so for me, I genuinely, and I said this when I was in retail, and I'll say it again as I'm a brand, it's up to us to educate the staff that are on the front line engaging with those consumers with quality education. It's the brand's fault and it's the retailer's responsibility to ensure that they're partnering with quality brands that are willing to bring that education, because it can't be the store manager's responsibility to understand every version of cultivation or every version of making concentrates. You have to have brands that are willing to partner quality levels with your staff and educate to get them to that higher education.
Thanks. I'd love to touch on that idea of consumer education a little bit more. I really value personalized consumer experiences when you're going into a retailer, but and I know that can be super powerful in driving loyalty, right? But then at the same time, when you have these more budget-conscious consumers who value efficiency, how do you kind of balance those two things, personalization and efficiency at scale?
Well, the conversation about having the education as to why something is what it is, I think is probably one of the most important parts. I've had literally this interaction, and I was just talking with Caleb about it backstage, where I'm trying to sell a quality single source rosin to a store, and they'll say, oh, well, this butane extracted product is half the price. And the understanding of what the difference is in those products is going to be how you convert that consumer to potentially be willing to spend a little extra money. You'll never get it if the only understanding is this one's cheaper. That'll never happen.
Yeah, and I think you have consumers that come in all day and potentially undermine some of the training of retail platforms. Like we spend across our fleet, it's 2 weeks of training before you're on the floor by yourself. But that ongoing education and maintenance training is so critical because, in particular markets, the Central Valley is a lot different than the San Mateo Peninsula, right? So you have more cost-conscious consumers. So if that bud tender or that guide is experiencing somebody coming in every single day saying, what's the cheapest, highest THC, it starts to unwind their training. So as a retailer, I think it's really part of our culture and values to ensure that, we continue to retrain and reinforce, good sales practices, because at the end of the day, that consumer is coming in for an experience. They could go on, any of the platforms and have something delivered to their house quickly. They're making a conscious choice to walk through a door. And if you can deliver an exceptional experience, it doesn't just have to be predicated on price. While I think statewide you are seeing kind of a slip in average basket, I think that has to do with the broader economy. I think you could look at a number of different retail platforms and you would see really varying degrees of slippage there. I think we've really, Embark have maintained that margin and that basket, I think because of the service we deliver, and that's really been the backbone of our success. And I think that monetizing these customers, no matter what segment they're in, having your own channel for loyalty is critical. So our Passport Club is the backbone of our organization. And again, going back to the point I made earlier, if we're able to get somebody to come through our doors and purchase 4 times, that customer, is an Embark customer, for the foreseeable future. So it really, I think, comes down to the brands educating. It comes down to the retailers training, and not just capitulating to this race to the bottom in pricing, because that harms the entire industry. And I know it's hard to say sometimes because, as you see sliding margins and performance, we see retailers that'll just start doing, 50% off every single day, and, thinking that, that's how somehow they're going to win customers. And the moment that deal goes away, they see that customer attrition. So it's hard to be disciplined and make, smart choices in this market, given how challenging the market is. But if I think if the industry kind of had a unified ethos on that, we'd all be better for it.
Yeah, as an owner of retail and a brand, we're faced with the dilemma on how to handle the situation of educating customers the right way from both sides, right? On the retail side, I'm really proud of our team. They've implemented what's called Breakfast with Connected, and they give a platform for brands. If a brand is willing to come early in the morning, 7 a.m., and really spend time, and it's not just about bringing donuts, right? Please, enough with the donuts. Like, let's let's get some healthy shit in there, right? An acai bowl, something. But anyways, if a brand's willing to come at 7 a.m. and spend that time, we're willing to put in the effort to give you the platform to allow our customers to be educated. Because education of the consumer is the only chance that we stand at not letting marketing, a giant marketing machine that is pushing, whatever product that doesn't stand behind quality, doesn't have a story of authenticity. It's just pretty packaging and the lowest possible inputs put into it. And that's a big threat to our industry. It's a big threat to quality at all ranges of the product spectrum. It's not just the premium category. It's a threat to everyone. So education is critical. And then on the brand side, you can do your best. You can write the SOPs. You can write a brand Bible, but just sending, brand reps out into the field to stand in the corner of a dispensary, it's not going to get the job done. So we've implemented a pretty intensive training program for dispensaries on the brand side. Anyone who will let us in and come and spend time, because we have two things that we need to educate. We've got to educate about our story, who we are, where we come from, because I truly believe in the cannabis space. It's one of the last few remaining CPG categories. Except, food, we're seeing it kind of resurface, but it's one of the last CPG categories that the consumer actually does care where their products come from. So the onus is on us to educate them where we got started in the industry, how we got here, some of the things that we influenced, some of the products you see on the shelves and brands you see are here because of some of the things that we did, and I think that people find interest in that. And then there's the product education, like why is this unique? Why do they have a proprietary breeding program, right? And getting samples to the consumers has been one of the most challenging, to the bud tenders who are the front line, is one of the biggest challenges we face as a brand. And a lot of the dispensaries, you drop off samples and they'll just take it and they'll put it on. They'll take it for themselves, the managers, the owners, or they'll put it for sale. And so we've had to get extremely creative. If you create and sell a really high quality product, you've got to make sure that you can educate. Verbal education is super critical, but they've heard so much at this point, so you've got to double it up and get them the product. And so we found some really creative ways to do that, and we invest tremendously in education all the way around. Our bud tenders get paid at the retail to show up and listen to that training. Obviously, you've got to do that. And then on the brand side, our budget for training and product sampling, and not just giving it away, right? Like there has to be a story behind it. Why is this new Super Silver Haze, hybrid or sativa hybrid interesting? Why should you consider it? Why should you sell it over, LCG times whatever the hell, that's 75 versions on your shelf? It's because it's differentiated. There's something different. There's a different effect. And why is it so expensive? Because there's so much behind the scenes that goes into developing something different that interests you. So education is key for the survival of brands, for the survival of retail, and for the survival of this industry as many of us love it and know it today.
I was going to mention one thing, so building off of what everyone said. So of course, educating your staff, being able to educate customers is crucial, but one consumer segment is the new consumers. So not just trying to get a bigger slice of the pie for the artistry, but creating a bigger pie by really appealing to people that maybe have never shopped for cannabis before. It's kind of hard to believe when you're from SoCal that there's people that aren't going and buying weed at a store, but it's true. And even my friends, And so for the artistry, the customer experience, that's very much focused on educating consumers and having a lot of product options and not focusing on price and, the race to the bottom, because we're never going to win that. But really focusing on that customer experience is a way to normalize cannabis and to get people in the door feeling comfortable and then getting them coming back. And we also have 2 consumption lounges. So that's another another way to really help normalize the experience and get people that maybe are interested and curious but don't even know what to buy in a store to come into the lounge space, which feels like a restaurant or, like another hospitality venue in the area, and just get them familiar with cannabis and really help normalize it across the board.
Yeah, Lauren, you said something really interesting to me earlier, which was that you were noticing the senior segment spends significantly more per purchase. How are you going about identifying these top spending customer categories? Are there certain metrics or KPIs that you're looking at on a regular basis?
Yeah, so we have data of all the customers that come in, their age, their gender, what they buy each time, how frequently they visit the stores. So we can really look at that closely and see what the differences are and which customers are really driving value. And for our brand, we aren't focused. We want to appeal to all types of customers, but we knew that we were never going to win on being the cheapest store or, catering to people that only cared about price, or maybe we're only looking for those clout brands. So while we carry those, we wanted to really tailor our offerings to the other consumers that are maybe underserved because other stores didn't really feel welcoming to them. And we've seen, for the older consumers, they spend more, and part of it is that they're buying, wellness products or tinctures that may just cost more per item, but they also love their flower. So it's not that they're just buying the products you might think, like gummies and wellness things, but they're buying a lot of flower too. And so, we want to make sure that, going back to education and customer experience, that our staff is really well equipped to help those customers out, to hold their hand, to educate them, and hopefully encourage them to buy more each time that they visit.
Yeah, the days of licking your finger and checking which way the wind direction is going to determine, what you're going to sell and how you're going to sell it are long gone. Data collection is critical in this business, proper data analysis. And you can't rely on the data services, I'll tell you that. I mean, they are a valuable tool, they're directional, but your own data collection and analysis is more and more every day is becoming one of the most critical tools. And you find ways to tailor your business, to tailor even the way that your storefront is laid out. You do A/B tests, like if you put this $5 pre-roll by the register, are you going to increase your average ticket size? You could guide things to certain days. We're analyzing what are the analytics of a Tuesday compared to a Sunday, right? Like they're both low days to us. How can we get them up? Who's coming in on those days? And switching stuff up in the stores. So, I wish we would have started a lot longer, but data analysis is the number one tool to really getting that incremental sale these days for us.
Then jumping off, I couldn't agree more. We're in a unique spot in cannabis. So while we have, two arms and a leg tied behind our back, inflation, we've had inverse inflation. What other CPG industry have prices gone down? Meanwhile, price of milk has doubled. Labor inputs have obviously gone way up. You've got just an overarching, issue around just, I think, disposable incomes. But the one thing we do have compared to any other retail industry that I'm aware of is data. What other industry does somebody have to come in and swipe their driver's license? Like, where else do you get that rich data to target? And going back to having an own channel and managing that well, that's you really, survival is is on the individual operator. And then I think even looking at, there's 8,000 licenses in California, right? Or over 8,000 licenses. Of those 8,000 plus licenses, only 1,200 are retail. Of those 1,200, how many are actually open? So you have this fragmented supply chain, again, where, in most other industries, the top selling products are always available. It's really hard to educate and conform a consumer, on preference in this industry, because that's just not the case because of the fracture in the supply chain. So, I think given all of those dynamics, it's a really tough area to operate. And that's why I said any person that's willing to walk through a licensed door is the segment that you focus on. But using data to ensure that you're learning who that customer is and then to retarget is really critical. But it's not easy out there.
I definitely want to mirror everything they said about data, but the thing that I think a lot of people missed was that data of the demographic before they got their real estate. So when we all were at a race for getting our retail licenses, a lot of people were taking what they could get as far as what city, what municipality, who was willing to let you play in the cannabis sandbox ended up being a big piece as to how a lot of people ended up in areas where they just can't conceptualize how to make money because there wasn't any money in that area to begin with. And so you go into a market thinking that you're going to be a high-end consumer market, and that's not the demographic. I will say the artistry is a perfect example of what knowing what your market is before you get there. They understood their senior community, and they ended up in Laguna Woods, which is the best senior community in the entire state of California. They knew their market. They sought out real estate. They sought out opportunity, and they ended up in a place that was authentic to who they are. And now that's important when you're building your brand before you step into that brand new area in the middle of the IE that you've never been to in your entire life because you're from the beach and you think that you're just going to start selling all kinds of weed out of there. Do the research as to, you know, what that market looks like. I do a lot of consulting for other states, and New York was a perfect example. People would be like, oh, we're going to open at this place in upstate, and I like pull the numbers of like who is actually in that city and how many people, and I'm like, nah, you're not going to do that. Like, that's a big waste of your time. You're the best road you've got is this road, and you're through traffic, and nobody's going to drive to that side of town to get this. Like, are you going to just be specifically the bottom of the barrel? Because that's your economy. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people didn't do their due diligence before they got their real estate in the efforts to become cannabis barons. They didn't properly map out who they were targeting before they bought their land and or all the licensing.
So this wouldn't be a conversation about California cannabis if we didn't touch on the illicit market. I'm curious if anyone wants to speak up and talk about if that is a segment that you're intentionally trying to convert into the regulated market.
Daily. I think that should be something that anybody who is not targeting the newbies, if that's not your focus, the understanding of how do we get the unregulated market to walk through your door, and I'm going to be really honest, I don't think they're going to. I think you're going to have to go to them, and converting and finding that ability to properly DTC your business to them is going to be, I think, a lot of that unregulated market experience is actually the thing that I think a lot of small businesses are seeing now, which is the value of the direct to consumer.
I agree with Nicole on location selection and market selection. I differ on illicit participation because I think that when our taxes are 40%, make our products 40% higher than an unlicensed shop, it's just really hard to convert that consumer. But I would say that, and shout out to the artistry as well on this, but market selection is critical, ensuring that you're going into markets that aren't oversaturated, like Embark is not in San Francisco and LA, just because of the illicit pressure there and the pricing pressure. So really selecting markets that you can build a moat around your business and protect your market share is really critical. And I think you find that in those more limited licensed communities, it's typically a slightly more conservative consumer base that you can educate. You're going to have the more traditional consumer that's open to easier access, frequent your store, but yeah, I mean, not all markets are created in equally in this nation state.
I also mostly meant for the brands themselves, not the retailers. I don't think the retailers have a direct-to-consumer flow-through. The brands do, because once we don't have to have another person stepping on the price in between, it does suck for the taxes. But if you're selling directly from your farm to the consumer, that I think is going to be one of the only ways to find a profit for a lot of these brands.
Yeah, I think we have an opportunity. Connected has an opportunity to play an interesting role. I mean, I think our brand is reminiscent of the black bag, the duffel bag days, and so. But we've clearly been focused on the legal market for since it's become legal in California. But we can influence, and a lot of us all can influence some of those brands, some of those folks that are still playing a really heavy hand in that market, and educate them about the opportunities that exist in the legal market. We've got to work together. We cannot. The unification of the cannabis industry is mandatory for our success, and so we're doing whatever we can to help bring some of those folks into the space, help them focus, see the opportunity, and support them in any way that we can, because they're our peers.
That's all the time we have, unfortunately. It just flew by. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and thank you so much for joining us.
Let's give it up for our panel.